there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1983 slasher film, Sleepaway Camp. Now, Sleepaway Camp is one of those films that I had watched like once or twice when I was younger, when I was really getting into slasher films and horror films in general, but I never really remember it being one of my personal favorites. But after revisiting the film again after quite a while, I really enjoyed it. I was honestly surprised by how much I liked this film. And I see what a lot of other people see in this one now. I think that this is definitely one of the more unique slashers of the 80s, and that definitely does help it when it comes to it standing out from a lot of other slashers from the early 80s and just from the 80s in general. And there's a certain vibe about it that's vicious and vile, but at the same time fun. And I think that's really a factor that makes this film have pretty significant, long lasting legacy. And I think it's a big reason why it still gets new fans to this day. I wouldn't say that I think it's a great film, but I think it's quite good for what it is. And I think it is easily one of the better low budget slashers that are out there. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on Sleepaway Camp, I would like to give a special shout out to Andrew for requesting this review, as well as reviews of the first three films in the franchise. And if there is another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal, my Patreon, or my Cash App. The links to all three are in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your requests as soon as I possibly can. Now, Sleepaway Camp is directed by a man named Robert Hiltzik. And prior to Sleepaway Camp, he had never directed anything. This was his first film. He also wrote Sleepaway Camp. And the direction is not what I would consider to be particularly impressive or incredible or a genuine feat, so to speak. But I think that it is, at the very least, favorable for the kind of film that Sleepaway Camp is. Sleepaway Camp is a gritty, low budget slasher. And the direction is absolutely a reflection of that. And while the direction isn't something that features a ton of different sort of camera angles or POVs or a different kind of camera techniques, it still features a lot of the hallmarks and a lot of the elements that you expect from a slasher film, and it's handled in a way that's rather effective. Still are some POV shots, especially the POV of the killer, and there are some other ways that Robert directs this film that really creates a genuine visceral feel to the movie. He also does a good job at shooting the more laid back scenes that are far less intense. And you got to give him a lot of credit for how he shot the various different kills in the film. There's a lot of scenes in this where you don't necessarily see the kill happen. You see the aftermath of the kill, but the way that he shot those scenes very up close and in your face, it really made the film have a very unsettling feel to it. And you can't talk about an unsettling feel or vibe without mentioning the ending. And the way that Robert shot that in particular was genuinely great, if you ask me. Like, it easily could have been shot in a way that was nowhere near as, disturbing, but the way that he shot it with, the angles that he chose, the overall perspective, it just creates a sequence that is honestly, in a lot of ways, genuinely unforgettable. Like, it really sticks with you and gets under your skin, and I think there's a good amount of scenes throughout this film that are like that, and while it may not win any awards, Robert's direction may not be something that is technically tremendous on every level. I do feel that his direction overall for the film, especially for a first time director, is still relatively solid. The film is also written by Robert Hiltzik, and I don't think he had a lot of experience writing films either before this. But just like with the direction, he does a commendable job with the screenplay. It starts out really strong. It does a great job in terms of really grabbing your attention with this tragedy involving uh, a couple kids and their father with a motorboat. So there's an accident that happens, and it winds up costing the lives of a couple people. It kills these poor kids' father and kills one of the children. And I do appreciate the fact that even though this is a pretty gruesome film, it doesn't show too much in this opening scene. It decides to take the less is more approach, and it makes it honestly more disturbing because then you can just picture the brutalness of the accident in your head. And I do think that that was a rather tasteful approach, and I definitely think it was the right one. But right from the beginning, you already have a very signature tone, in my opinion, for this script and for the film, which is a very unsettling tone and overall mood. And it continues with the way that you're introduced to Angela and her cousin Ricky. Because you have this mother figure who was it was their aunt, Dr. Martha Thomas, and the way that she is written, the way that this character carries herself, it is really unnerving. She sounds like a space alien. She sounds like she's on a multitude of different drugs. She just really has this aura of somebody who cannot be trusted, and on top of that, shouldn't really be around kids. And it just creates this very unnerving, unsettling vibe uh, that was started with the opening of the story. And then it continues during the scenes at Camp Arawak. But there are some moments where there's a nice bit of levity that's injected and infused into the story and the script with some genuinely hilarious and memorable lines of dialogue. Like this whole bit between Bill and Ricky during a baseball game where Bill is mad at Ricky and he's all like, "Eat shit and die, Ricky." And then Ricky's like, "Eat shit and live, Bill." I love that line. I love that line from Ricky. And there's some other lines that are memorable, like the whole bit with Judy, who is one of the many bullies in the story and in the film that are bullying poor Angela, and she's talking about Angela, and she says, Angela is a carpenter's wet dream. She's flat as a board and needs a screw. You're just like, damn, that is that is savage. So there's actually a fair amount of lines like that in this script that are honestly really clever and make you laugh, and there's this other little moments with the kids where they're pranking each other or they're just having these moments of bonding that really creates almost like a meatballs vibe, but there's still a very sinister, twisted undertone underneath all of it, which makes it feel more like Meatballs meets Halloween, which I think is honestly a pretty interesting uh, mix. And I think it actually works rather well. And the kills I felt were pretty creative and gruesome and disturbing in their own way. Uh, the first victim isn't even really somebody who gets killed, but he probably wishes he died, considering his ultimate fate. And to me, it's rather fitting because the guy deserves to suffer. Because the first victim is Artie, this pedophile, this cook at the camp who tries to molest Angela. And the killer, who let's just be honest, we all know it's Angela, and I don't need a spoiler alert because this movie is how old? And most people who would be watching a review of Sleepaway Camp are already aware of the twist and they already know who the killer is. But anyway, the killer, Angela, her first victim is Artie, and she dumps boiling water all over him. And the aftermath of it is done really well with makeup effects that make you wince. And her second victim is this guy named Kenny, and he winds up getting drowned in his canoe. And you don't see him get drowned. You don't see him die. You see his body later, though, after it's been decomposing for days, and there's like snakes and all kinds of like leeches and stuff all over it. And it's honestly a really unnerving, unsettling image. This film is honestly one of the better films I've seen that has a lot of kills that are aftermath shots, but they still have some serious impact to them, where you don't actually feel like, oh, I really needed to see more. No, it isn't that way at all, because then you have other kills like this kid named Billy who winds up getting stung to death by bees after Angela throws a beehive into the stall that he was in. And um, you see this shot of like his like arm and like part of his face that's all like stung and has all these different bee stings on it, and they're all swelling up and they're all red, and then you see all these bees all over his body. And then you have another kill later on where Judy, she gets killed by being penetrated with a hot electric curling iron, but you just see like the shadow of the act. You don't actually see it happening, but you hear her screaming and you hear the sizzling, and it's just something that honestly makes it all the more disturbing that you don't see anything other than this shadow on the wall and you just hear what's happening. And you have Meg, who winds up getting stabbed through the back while she's in the shower. You have these other kids who wind up actually getting killed in their sleeping bags by Angela. Like, Angela is like, I don't care if it was little kids who threw sand at me, they're gonna get it too. And I'm like, okay, that is definitely something you don't see all the time when it comes to horror films or even slashers. There are boundaries, but here there's no boundaries at all for Angela. Angela's like, everyone is a target. Everyone is a victim. Like, even her final victim, after she winds up killing Mel with a arrow. Her final victim is Paul, who is a young boy who she had a crush on and actually was infatuated with at one point. But then she lost trust in him and wound up killing him last and decapitated him. So, like, it, it is really a script and a story that is pretty vicious, and I have to give Robert a lot of credit for that. And then, of course, you have the ending, with Angela naked, holding, the severed head. I believe she's holding his severed head. She might just be holding a knife, but I think she was holding his severed head. And but that might be a Mandela effect going on. But yeah, Angela, who is now revealed to be a boy because you actually see Dick while she's like, just having this very just creepy growl, and then you see the reactions from everybody, and then the film freeze frames, and then you get to the end credits, and it's just such a memorable ending. Like, it really is, and it's memorable even if you know it's coming, because it's just so strange and surreal and disturbing. And I know that the script has gotten flack from certain people for being transphobic or something like that. I never really interpreted it that way, because when it comes to the context of this film in particular, Angela isn't really trans to me. Angela is somebody who was essentially forced to be something that they're not. That due to trauma, she became, or he, Paul. Yeah, no, I don't think Peter became Angela. And it wasn't really something that he chose at the time. But what makes it complicated is the context of the sequels, where Angela is just fully accepting of her identity and even had surgery and goes by, the female pronouns and all of that and so on and so forth. But I think that's those films are a little different in a multitude of different ways. So I think what was going on here was another way to be subversive. And I don't really think it was trying to be transphobic or homophobic. Although, there was a scene where young Peter and his sister see their father with another man, and they're kind of giggling and laughing. But the way that was presented was more of a case of, you know kids seeing something like that, and just looking at it as being strange and kind of silly that, their dad is with some other guy, but not really knowing the full context of that, because they're just kids. And I just didn't really get the vibe that this was like an outward or very clearly homophobic or transphobic kind of story and overall film. That's not my interpretation. My interpretation is not that Angela became a killer because of the fact that she was forced to be trans. Like, I think that there was something more to what was going on in this script than just that. I mean, that's definitely a factor because that was very traumatic, but I think that there's more going on. I was honestly surprised that there wasn't somebody at the camp, like a counselor, that was actually one of the people that killed Angela's father. I was surprised that Robert didn't go there with the script and the story, but it still worked very well because you had some pretty strong antagonists in Meg and Judy. They were some very cruel and unlikable and just awful characters, but in a way that was actually still kind of entertaining to watch, just when it comes to their sheer cattiness, and in Judy's case, just how much of an unashamed slut this young girl was. Like, Jesus Christ. And on top of that, I mean, there's just so much about the way that they acted and behaved, especially for Meg. Like, she's way older than these kids, and it was just one of those things where that also had an extra bit of edge, and that was added to the script and the story that definitely made it all the more effective to me. And I really did like the dynamic between Angela and her cousin Ricky. And I liked a lot of the stuff with Ricky in general because I think Ricky was written in a way where he was somebody that you could connect with and root for, and you felt bad for him when he was being singled out as a suspect and of all of these murders around the camp. And I also liked Paul and the way that his character was handled too. Like, it was very tragic what his ultimate fate was, and it was made all the more tragic because of just how well the writing was when it comes for to his character. You really grew to like him, and you actually wanted him to be with Angela. Like, you in a way, you wanted him to be with her because it seemed like he had an interest in her, and she seemed to have an interest in him, and it it definitely didn't end well for him, but I think that just makes the horror of Sleepaway Camp all the more effective because you have somebody like Paul who is, by all intents and purposes, pretty much a nice guy who still gets it in the end. So yeah, I think that other than maybe a few things here and there, I think this is a really good script. The cast, you definitely have some of the actors here that aren't really the best actors out there, but they make up for it with personality and with a bit of charm. But there's still are some good performers in this, and one of them is absolutely Felissa Rose as Angela. Like, I really felt that she did a fantastic job because a good chunk of her performance is emoting and acting without saying a word, and I think she nailed that in terms of showing different emotions and different feelings that Angela was experiencing or going through without saying much at all. Because Angela doesn't really say anything until like 30 minutes into the movie. And I felt that she did a really good job showing the shy nature of Angela, but also the depraved and psychotic nature of the character. And it was just a really nuanced, strong performance by a young actor. Jonathan Tiersten, I also really enjoyed as Ricky. He was definitely more of a character who was a hothead, but in a likable way. Karen Fields was just a slutty bitch from hell, but she played it so well and in a way that was entertaining and like, I hate this character and I want to see her go down, but not in the kind of way where you just don't want to see any more of her. Like it was generally a performance that you love to hate. Christopher Collet as Paul in his first acting role, he was really a solid too. Really efficient when it comes to showing the different aspects of his character, showing the different layers that Paul had, and he had his own bit of likability and charm that he added to the character. You would see why Christopher Collet would go on to have a decent career going forward for a young actor after this, because he was in Firstborn pretty soon after with Peter Weller and Corey Haim. Mike Kellin is Mel, very sleazy camp owner. Apparently, he was very ill when he did this film, but you couldn't really tell because I think he still delivered a pretty decent performance despite everything he was going through. Katherine Kamhi is Meg. She was also really effective and really strong when it comes to playing, Judy's sidekick. The another character who is just an absolute bitch to Angela, and in a way that makes you really hate her, but not to the point where you necessarily want to see her die a horrible, horrific death. But you definitely want to see her get some kind of comeuppance because of just how much of a shitty person Meg is. But the reason why that works so well is because Catherine did such a good job playing that role. And the rest of the kids are all right. I mean, like Paul DeAngelo is Ronnie, and Susan Glaze is Susie, and Laura Salahan is Billy, and Amy Bao is Brooke, and Tom Vandell is Mike, and Johnny Dunn is Kenny, and Ethan LaRosa is Jimmy, and Willie Cuskin is Mozart. But the majority of the cast is Felissa Rose, Jonathan Tiersten, Christopher Collet, Mike Kellin, and Katherine Kamhi. The cinematography by Benjamin Davis, I think it's it's not too bad. I think it's for the most part a positive, pretty satisfactory overall. I also feel that the editing by Ron Kalish, Ralph Rosenblum, and Sharon L. Ross is more of the same. The music by Edward Billos, I also didn't mind. I definitely feel it added a little bit extra when it comes to the film's mood and its atmosphere. The song that they use at the end credits though is just kind of weird. It's like a ballad, and I don't really know how that fits with the tone of the movie. But it's kind of fitting in a way though, because this is definitely a very out of the box kind of slasher film. So it kind of fits that the the song at the end credits is also in a similar vein. And it's like a 84-minute long movie, and that's what the end credits. You take out the end credits, it's even shorter. So it's not really a film that takes too much time. It doesn't really have a lot of slow parts. And I think there's a good balance of humor and horror. And I do think that there's a good amount of balance when it comes to the kills as well. This is not something where, oh, they have a long stretch of time where there's no kills and there's nothing happening when it comes to the body count. This isn't one of those slashers, so it has a good balance when it comes to that. And I think the production and the crew and everybody involved with it did excellent job balancing a $350,000 budget. That's the budget for this film, and they stretched it to its limits and got the most out of it that they possibly could, and honestly created a film that did more with less than other films have done with so much more, like 2 or 3 times the budget. So, yeah, I definitely do agree that Sleepaway Camp is a gem when it comes to, the slasher genre. This is one that I will absolutely be putting on, rotation during the summer going forward, because I enjoyed it that much. So yeah, that is my, thoughts on, Sleepaway Camp, and as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. See ya.